What if the person meant to be your soulmate only found you because he was running for his life? Tonight's story is about Lydia, a young woman who had been hidden away from society her entire life, living in isolation with only books and gardens for company. Her overprotective guardian claimed the world was too dangerous for someone as delicate as her. But the truth was far more complex. When an ancient vampire lord arrived at their remote estate, wounded and seeking sanctuary from enemies who wanted him destroyed, everything about Lydia's sheltered existence began to unravel. This powerful, dangerous stranger saw past her guardian's lies to the remarkable woman hidden beneath layers of imposed fear and isolation. This is a story about breaking free from golden cages, about finding love that gives you courage to face the world, and discovering that sometimes the most dangerous person you could meet is also the safest place you could find. If you believe that everyone deserves freedom to choose their own path, hit that subscribe button now, because this story will show you the power of love to break even the strongest chains. Lydia Ashford pressed her face against the tower window, watching storm clouds gather over the moors beyond Ravencroft Estate. At 23, she had never set foot beyond the estate's iron gates, never spoken to anyone besides her guardian and the handful of servants who attended to their isolated household. The world is a cruel place for delicate souls like yourself, her guardian, Professor Marcus Whitmore, reminded her daily. Here, you are safe from those who would exploit your gentle nature. But as Lydia watched ravens circle the ancient oak trees, she wondered if safety was worth the price of never truly living. Her days followed the same pattern: morning lessons with the professor in languages and literature, afternoons tending the greenhouse gardens he'd built for her amusement, evenings reading by the fire while he worked on his mysterious research. "Lydia," the professor's voice echoed up the tower stairs. "Come to the library." "We have work to do." She found him surrounded by ancient texts and strange instruments, his face bearing the intense expression that had become more frequent in recent months. At 65, Professor Whitmore had been her guardian since her parents' death when she was 5, and he claimed his life's work was protecting her from unspecified dangers that lurked in the outside world. "Your bloodline carries certain sensitivities," he explained when she questioned why she couldn't visit the nearby village. "There are those who would sense your unique nature and seek to harm you. Here, warded by my protective spells, you are invisible to such threats." Lydia had learned to accept these vague explanations, though they never quite satisfied her growing curiosity about the world beyond her beautiful prison. The estate was comfortable, even luxurious, with every book she could want, and gardens that bloomed in impossible abundance. But comfort couldn't fill the aching loneliness that grew stronger each year. That evening, as wind howled around the manor's ancient stones, an unexpected sound shattered their peaceful routine. The heavy bronze gates that had stood closed for 18 years were being forced open with supernatural strength. "Impossible," the professor whispered, his face draining of color as he rushed to the window. "The wards should prevent any supernatural being from approaching." Through the glass, Lydia saw a figure stumbling up the long drive, a tall man in a dark coat, moving with obvious difficulty despite his evident strength. Even from a distance, she could see blood staining his clothes. "Go to your chambers and lock the door," the professor commanded, his usual calm replaced by barely controlled panic. "Whatever happens, do not come out until I call for you." But Lydia had spent 23 years obeying orders that kept her isolated from everything interesting or dangerous. For once, curiosity overcame compliance. She waited until the professor hurried downstairs to deal with their unexpected visitor, then crept to the top of the main staircase where she could observe without being seen. The stranger who collapsed in their entrance hall was unlike anyone from her limited experience. Aristocratic features spoke of noble breeding, but there was something otherworldly about his pale skin and the way shadows seemed to cling to him. His dark hair was matted with blood, and deep wounds across his chest suggested he'd been fighting for his life. "Sanctuary," he gasped as the professor approached cautiously. "I claim ancient right of sanctuary." "You have no right to anything here," the professor replied coldly. "Leave immediately, or face the consequences of trespassing on protected ground." "Protected? From what?" the stranger asked, his voice growing stronger despite his injuries. "What are you hiding in this place that requires such powerful wards?" "Nothing that concerns you, vampire." The word sent a thrill of terror and fascination through Lydia. A vampire. One of the creatures from the Gothic novels she read voraciously, seeking adventure in fiction since it was forbidden in reality. "I can smell her," the vampire said suddenly, his head turning toward the staircase where Lydia hid. "Sweet blood, untouched by the world. What kind of monster keeps a young woman prisoner in the modern age?" "She is under my protection," the professor snarled, "and you will not corrupt her with your presence." But it was too late. The vampire's eyes had found Lydia in the shadows, and for the first time in her life, someone looked at her not as a delicate flower to be protected, but as a person with agency and strength of her own. Despite the professor's furious protests, Lydia found herself drawn down the staircase by a force stronger than 18 years of conditioning. The vampire's eyes, a striking silver that seemed to glow in the lamplight, never left her face as she descended. "Lydia, return to your chambers immediately," Professor Whitmore commanded, but his voice lacked its usual authority. The vampire's presence had shattered the careful control he'd maintained over their household. "Let her choose," the vampire said, his voice weak but carrying an undertone of power that made the air vibrate. "She's old enough to decide whether to help a wounded stranger or leave him to die on your doorstep." The professor stepped between them protectively. "She knows nothing of your kind, creature. Don't drag an innocent into your dark world." "Innocent, perhaps, but not ignorant," the vampire replied, his silver gaze finding Lydia again. "I can see intelligence in her eyes. She understands more than you give her credit for." Lydia felt a flush of gratitude at being acknowledged as capable of thought and judgment. "What happened to you?" she asked, ignoring the professor's sharp intake of breath at her defiance. "I was betrayed by someone I trusted," the vampire explained, his hand pressed against the wounds on his chest. "A rival clan has been hunting me for months. I thought I could trust an old ally, but he led them straight to me. And you came here because this estate has protections older than your guardian realizes. Wards that don't distinguish between one supernatural being and another. They simply hide what lies within from hostile detection." Professor Whitmore's face grew ashen. "You know about the ancient protections?" "I helped establish them 3 centuries ago," the vampire replied with a bitter smile, "though I never imagined they'd be used to imprison an innocent woman." "I am not imprisoned," Lydia said automatically, then paused. Was she? The gilded cage of Ravencroft Estate had been her entire world for so long that she'd stopped questioning whether it was truly home or prison. "Aren't you?" the vampire asked gently. "When did you last choose your own path? Make your own decisions? Speak to someone your guardian hadn't pre-approved?" The questions hit like physical blows. Lydia realized she couldn't remember ever making a meaningful choice about her own life. "You're bleeding," she said, changing the subject because his words cut too close to truths she wasn't ready to examine. "Shouldn't we help you?" "Lydia, no," the professor warned. "You don't understand what you're offering." "I'm offering basic human decency," Lydia replied with a firmness that surprised them all. "He's injured and asking for sanctuary." "How is that different from helping any wounded traveler?" "Because he's not human," the professor said desperately. "He's a predator, a killer. His very nature is to deceive and destroy." The vampire laughed weakly. "And what are you, Whitmore?" "A man who's kept a young woman isolated from the world for 18 years, telling her it's for her own protection, while you study her unique bloodline for your own purposes." "That's enough," the professor snarled, but Lydia had already heard too much. "What does he mean, study my bloodline?" she demanded. "What unique nature? What purposes?" For the first time in her memory, Professor Whitmore looked uncertain, trapped between his need to maintain control and his fear of the vampire's revelations. "Your parents weren't killed in an accident," the vampire said softly. "They were murdered because of what they discovered about certain bloodlines, certain gifts that run in old families, gifts that some people would kill to possess or control." "Stop," the professor pleaded. "You'll destroy everything I've worked to protect." "Or finally give her the truth she deserves," the vampire countered, his silver eyes holding Lydia's gaze. The choice, as always, should be hers. Standing between her guardian and this dangerous stranger, Lydia realized she was about to make the first real decision of her adult life. "Tell me the truth," Lydia said, her voice steadier than she felt. "All of it. What am I, really? Why have I been kept here?" Professor Whitmore looked between her and the vampire, his face a mask of defeat and desperation. "Lydia, please. Some knowledge is too dangerous to possess." "More dangerous than ignorance?" the vampire asked. He had managed to prop himself against the wall, though blood still seeped through his torn shirt. "She deserves to know why her life has been stolen from her." "Stolen?" Lydia turned to face her guardian. "Is that what this has been? Not protection, but theft?" "I saved you," the professor said desperately. "When your parents were killed, forces were already moving to capture you. I brought you here, warded this place, kept you hidden from those who would use your abilities for evil purposes." "What abilities?" Lydia demanded. The vampire answered when the professor remained silent. "You're what we call a conduit, someone who can channel and amplify magical energy. Your bloodline can bridge the gap between human and supernatural worlds, making you incredibly valuable to those who seek power." "That's why he's really here," the professor said, pointing an accusing finger at the vampire. "Not seeking sanctuary, but seeking you, another predator drawn to your gifts." "If I wanted to use her," the vampire replied calmly, "I would hardly have revealed her true nature. I could have played the grateful refugee, won her trust slowly, and manipulated her into helping me willingly." "Then why did you tell me?" Lydia asked. "Because you deserve the freedom to choose your own path with full knowledge of the consequences." The vampire's silver eyes were intense but honest. "Yes, you have gifts that others would exploit. Yes, the world contains dangers your guardian hasn't prepared you to face. But that doesn't give him the right to steal your life." Lydia looked around the entrance hall that had been the boundary of her world for 18 years. Beautiful, comfortable, safe, and completely closed to her own choices. "What would happen if I left?" she asked quietly. "You'd face real dangers," the vampire said honestly. "But also real joys, real connections, real life. You'd learn to use your abilities to help rather than hide. You'd discover who you truly are when not defined by other people's fears. And you'd be killed within months," the professor added harshly. "Torn apart by those who want to harvest your power, or drain your blood, or force you to channel dark magic against innocent people." "Perhaps," the vampire agreed. "Or perhaps she'd learn to protect herself, find allies who value her for more than her gifts, and live a life worth the risks involved." Lydia closed her eyes, trying to imagine a world beyond Ravencroft's walls. The thought terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. "If I choose to leave," she said slowly, "would you teach me?" "About my abilities, about protecting myself, about surviving in your world." "Our world," the vampire corrected gently. "You're already part of it whether you acknowledge it or not. But yes, I would teach you everything I know. Not as someone who owns your service, but as someone who respects your right to choose your own destiny." "Lydia, please," the professor pleaded. "Everything I've done has been to keep you safe. Don't throw that away for the promises of a creature who sees you as a tool to be used." "Look at me," the vampire said softly. When Lydia met his gaze, she saw not the hungry predator the professor had described, but someone who understood the weight of the choice she faced. "I won't lie to you about the dangers, but I also won't lie about the possibilities. The question is, do you want to live your life, or merely survive it?" Standing in that hallway, Lydia realized she had already made her choice. The only question now was whether she had the courage to act on it. "What's your name?" she asked the vampire. "Lord Adrian Blackthorne," he replied with a slight bow. "And I would be honored to help you discover who Lydia Ashford truly is when she's free to become herself." "Then I choose freedom," Lydia said, the words feeling like both an ending and a beginning. "Whatever the cost." The professor's face crumpled with a mixture of grief and rage as Lydia's words sank in. "You don't understand what you're choosing," he said desperately. 23 years I've protected you, sacrificed everything to keep you safe, and you'll throw it all away for a stranger's promises." "You sacrificed my life, not yours," Lydia replied, feeling strength she'd never known she possessed flowing through her. "My choices, my experiences, my chance to discover who I could become. That's not protection, it's control." Adrian straightened despite his wounds, his silver eyes bright with approval. "Your first real choice, and already you show wisdom that took me centuries to develop." "This isn't wisdom, it's foolishness," the professor snapped. "You think the world will welcome someone with your abilities? You think people won't fear and hate what they don't understand?" "Some will," Adrian agreed calmly. "Others will celebrate it. The difference is that she'll face both with full knowledge and the power to defend herself rather than cowering in ignorance and isolation." Lydia moved closer to Adrian, noticing how the professor tensed as if she were approaching a wild animal. "Can you travel?" "Your wounds will heal faster once I'm away from the suppression wards your guardian has woven around this place," Adrian said. "Magic doesn't flow properly here. It's part of what's kept your abilities dormant." "Dormant?" Lydia felt a flutter of excitement mixed with apprehension. "You mean I actually have powers?" "Extraordinary ones," Adrian confirmed. "I can sense them now that I'm close to you. You could heal with a touch, shield others from magical attacks, even bridge communication between supernatural species that have been enemies for centuries. Lies, the professor said bitterly. Pretty lies to lure you into his world of darkness and death. Then let me prove it, Adrian said, extending his bloodied hand toward Lydia. Touch my wounds and let your instincts guide you. If nothing happens, I'll leave and never return. If something does, don't, the professor pleaded. Once you open that door, there's no closing it again. Lydia looked at Adrian's offered hand, then at the professor who had shaped her entire existence around fear and limitation. Maybe I don't want to close it. She placed her palm against the deepest wound on Adrian's chest. Immediately, warmth flowed through her fingertips, followed by a sensation like golden light pouring from her soul into his damaged flesh. The wound began to close, new skin forming as if weeks of healing were compressed into moments. Incredible, Adrian breathed, his voice stronger as the healing energy restored him. Your power is even greater than I sensed. Lydia stared at her hands in wonder. I did that? You did that, Adrian confirmed, now standing without difficulty. And that's just the beginning of what you're capable of. The professor slumped in defeat. You've doomed her to a life of running, hiding, fighting. Every supernatural faction will want to claim her now. Or, Adrian said, helping Lydia gather a few precious belongings, she'll become the bridge that finally brings peace between our warring peoples. Her choice to make, not ours to dictate. As they prepared to leave Ravencroft Estate, Lydia felt simultaneously terrified and exhilarated. The world beyond those iron gates was vast, dangerous, and full of possibilities she'd never imagined. Are you certain? Adrian asked as they reached the threshold. Once we cross these wards, there truly is no going back. Lydia looked back at the tower room where she'd spent 18 years watching the world through windows, then at Adrian, who offered her the chance to finally step into that world herself. I've been living in a beautiful cage my entire life, she said, taking his offered arm. I'd rather face danger as myself than safety as someone else's carefully crafted prisoner. As they walked through the gates together, Lydia felt her dormant abilities awakening fully, responding to the magical energies that flowed freely beyond the estate's suppressive wards. Behind them, the professor watched from his window, while ahead lay a world ready to test everything she was about to become. Standing at the threshold between her old life and an uncertain future, Lydia realized that true safety doesn't come from hiding who you are, but from having the courage to become who you're meant to be. And if you believe that everyone deserves the freedom to choose their own path and discover their true potential, make sure you hit that subscribe button and share this story with anyone who's ever felt trapped by others' limitations. Tell us in the comments about a time when you chose courage over comfort. And remember, the most beautiful cages are still cages, and you hold the key to your own freedom. Until next time, never let fear of the unknown keep you from becoming who you're truly meant to be.